Test 1, 2, check, check. Okay, so fellows, we'll be talking into the microphone. Go ahead. Vic, I turn it over to you, sir.
Good morning, Council. Today we're going to be presenting you information on the current status of our EMS system, as well as any issues or concerns that they have, so that we'll start with kind of where we are, then we'll get into those issues that are facing them, and then we'll let Council take us wherever you want to go with whatever direction you want us to go in.
And so just context, we're a single agenda, and by our rules, we can't go outside that agenda. Right. Secondly, our next budget event is first reading, is that correct?
First reading is May 11th.
Yeah.
So we'll start having budget workshops before we have that.
So I know these guys are going to have a bunch of questions based
Absolutely.
on the last meeting.
That's what we're here for. So I'll turn it over to our EMS director, Gerald. You take it on.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Burns, Council, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. Just going to be going over the current, what EMS is facing, how we're dealing with what's going on in an ever-changing healthcare world. Some of these slides are going to look familiar to you. We talked about them a couple of months ago, and some of the problems and some of the things that we face every day it's not changing. It is what it is. So let's get started. All right, our workforce. Currently, we have 39 full-time team members, 39 FTEs, 21 paramedics, 7 advanced EMTs, 11 EMTs. Part-time, 22 members, 12 paramedics, 1 advanced EMT, and 9 EMTs. Over the past 24 months, we have lost, 18 to 24 months, we have lost 14 full-time staff, but we'll talk about threats here in a few minutes. The workforce, currently we're on a 24/48 schedule, which means we work approximately 246 hours a month. We require each certified individual to have at least 3 hours of continuing education, as well as with paramedics having to have their ABC courses such as ACLS and stuff of that nature. Total for the year is around $29.56. Annual salary for a paramedic is around $34,400. AMT is $40,000, and the average salary or the annual salary for a paramedic is around $50,000. As you guys know, because you've been willing to fund the purchase of these vehicles, these are our 2 platforms that we use. We have the Dodge 5500 Type 1 ambulance, which is one of the best ambulances on the market through AEV Traumahawk. And we have 2 QRVs, one that primarily serves the west side and one on the east side. Their responsibility is to provide backup for time-sensitive emergencies and command and control otherwise, supervision. Our deployment scheme, we have 5 stations. Station 1 is on Church Street, serves the Camden area. Station 2 is currently housed inside the government center here due to some issues that we have with our old Station 2. Station 3 is Mesa Lane. It says Camden there. I apologize. Mesa Lane is actually in Lugoff. Station 4 is in Elgin, and Station 5 is Porter Road up in the Bethune area. Just to give you some reference, we've talked about this before. There's 2 basic standards for the industry providing EMS ambulances to the citizens they serve. One is 1 ambulance per 10,000 population, and the other is 1 ambulance per 100 square miles. So based on the demographics, you guys see where we're at there. Workload, call volume continues to climb. Fiscal year 17-18, 8,700, 88 the following year. And then we see a pretty good jump there, 19-20 to 91-79. And right now, we're projected, based on our call volume since July, to be up around the 9,400 mark. So we're going to see an increase. You get the idea that it just continues to climb. The number of trucks have stayed the same. Station 1, as I said earlier, Camden, they run the bulk of our calls, 29%. Station 2, around 18%. Station 3, 20. Station 4, Elgin, 18%. And then Station 5 is notably the slower station in our county in the Bethune, Mount Pisgah area. 11%. Our QRVs run 4% of total volume, but as I said earlier, therefore cardiac backups, time-sensitive emergency backups, and command and control. Station 2 is the one that's was located at Lockhart. We've had to move that station we've had to move that station to the Camden area because of mold in the station. And since that time, since we moved in September, we are starting to see some of the balance there of call volumes. Because what we've done is we've had Unit 2 and Unit 1 go into a rotation. So 1 goes out and then 2 immediately goes out to the next call in the Camden area. So that's balanced some of that workload. We did that because of some of the safety issues with Station 1 carrying the bulk of the calls. Trying to make a good thing out of, lemonade out of lemons, I guess. Outcomes, 65% of the patients that we come in contact with or the calls that we respond to, we transport. Treated, refused transport around 12%. That's important because out of that 12%, you're getting a reduced amount of revenue generated from those calls, but you do still get something out of that, the wheels turning for those calls. Treated, transferred to air and medical, 1% of the volume. Canceled around 6%, and canceled on scene around 8%. Treated, transferred around 4%. Those treated and transferred are when our QRVs come in contact with the patient and then turn them over to an ambulance. And then, of course, your DOAs are around 2%. Yearly revenue, we have been very fortunate that our yearly revenue has been on a steady upward trajectory as well, based on the call volume and the documentation that our crews make sure that they put into their records. They do a fantastic job there. 17-18, as you can see, 1.5, 1.8, almost 2.1, and this year we're going to be talking about that a little bit more further in the presentation, but we're going to be around 2.1 again, 2 to 2.1 again this year. The fee scales, BLS 400, the number that you see in parentheses there, that's your allowable, all right? So when we send out that $400 bill, we're only expecting to receive $353 from the insurance companies, and that's pretty much set by Medicare and Medicaid, and most private insurers follow along those lines as well.
Explain what BLS, ALS, all that means.
Sure. Basic life support is just someone twists an ankle. They go out, they get picked up, and they were taken to the hospital. Minimal care, vital signs, stuff like that. ALS 1 is where the patient is complaining of an advanced life support type complaint, cardiac pain, respiratory distress, something of that nature. They get placed on the cardiac monitor. They may receive 1 to 2 drugs, medications, such as aspirin and nitro, and then that gives you permission to bill for ALS 1. ALS 2 is when the care of the patient is more extensive. It requires additional medications, maybe an advanced airway of something of that nature. The $12 per mile, that's what we're allowed to bill the patient once the patient is in the back of our ambulance and inbound to the hospital.
Gerald, quick question. What is our cost based on our fee?
What is our cost?
In other words, if it's like BLS, if there's a $400 fee, we collect $353 from insurance, what is our cost?
Actually, I've never done a cost analysis like that. Right, it would be basically it would be easy enough to do. It would be your call volume divided by what you spent last year.
Staff hours.
Right, yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I don't have that.
No, that's fine.
What's the asterisk hard billing? What does that mean?
The hard billing, we started hard billing towards the end of 18. It would have been 17, 18 is when we started it. In 1920, there was a windfall of our, basically a new computer system that our billing company was using, allowed them to go back and pull buckets from previous years, bad debt. People hadn't paid their bills, so they were able to go back and hit those buckets of hard debt. Now we're on a continuous stream. But what happened in 1920 was a windfall. Right. And Also, down here at the bottom, most insurance companies pay 80% of the allowable. So just because the $353.95 for a BLS call is what you're charging, or what is allowed by Medicare and Medicaid, they're only going to pay 80% of that. So you still have money that is going to be lost there. All right, moving into the current and future threats. Lack of adequate facilities for field staff or command staff. When we had to shut down our EMS Station 2, that really created a bit of havoc for us. We have seen an increase in response times, as you see there, increased call volume and response times. The Station 2 area moving into Camden has certainly impacted Westville, Shepherd, the Bear DeKalb area, and Liberty Hill. Difficulty recruiting and retaining staff. As I mentioned earlier, we've lost 14 and 18 to 24 months. It's an incredibly competitive market. We're competing with other county-run agencies, 911 agencies, as well as the private sector. Potential impending sale of the hospital with the loss of fee and lieu. I don't have to talk a whole lot about that. I believe that's way above my pay grade, but that's certainly something on the radar that, when I think about current and future threats, it's the things that wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I can't get back to sleep, but that's certainly one of them. Increasing aging fleet and equipment. I got the correct spelling in one area and missed it somewhere else, guys, I'm sorry. Increasing aging fleet. We have fallen behind on purchasing of units last year due to the COVID freeze and budget. And we'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about the rotation schedule that we set up in 17-18. But last year, we were supposed to purchase 2 units. That way, our first Dodges that we purchased in 2015 would rotate, and we would get some of the high-mileage blueberries, the blue trucks, off the road. So just so you know. All right, so just reinforcing current and future threats, that is our EMS2. It's up on Lockhart Road. It has, unfortunately, it's got black mold. We were advised that we needed to get our crews out of it back in September. So that's when we moved out of that station. This station, going back to that 2017, 2018, this station was actually slotted to be replaced when we elected to move from our original replacement schedule to building the station in Elgin to meet the requirements of paid 24-hour fire staff. So this station got pushed back, and unfortunately the mold just got too significant. We started receiving some complaints, and then we had a company come in, and it was found to have aspergillus and some other pretty hairy stuff in it.
Projected costs to repair, fix, replace?
Yes, sir. We talk about buildings here, but if you will let me continue, and then we'll get to it, sir. Thank you. Again, lack of adequate facilities in the Camden area, Station 1. When we moved into this station, it was understood that this was a 3 to 5 year temporary housing situation. As you can tell, the facility is not that good. If you see the green mold on the outside there, the interesting thing is there's also bubbling paint on the inside where the water seeps underneath the concrete there and actually floods the bedroom and one of the supply rooms. So it can be kind of challenging in heavy wet weather. With the moving of Station 2 into the government center, what we ended up having to do was we had to move our training officer out of the training room. We lost our training room because that became our bedrooms for Station 2. In the process of moving that truck to this location and then the generator going in, we lost a large amount of our storage capacity. So on top of losing our training out area, we also lost storage capacity. Our supervisor has been pushed to basically what we call our logistics room, and that's his workstation. This is just, with the generator, they put this little box in here, and that comes out about 6 feet. It gives you a little bit of idea of how much storage we have. During COVID, that has been incredibly challenging because, of course, we have additional PPE that we're having to order. We're having to stay ahead of any of the shortages. And I can tell you, we pretty much set on about 3 to 4 weeks of supplies using that room, the hallway, and also the print shop across the street. I forgot the name of that building, but over there.
Midlands.
Midlands Printing.
Midlands Printing. So you see how things are pretty spread out. All right, the increasing call volume and high UHU, we've talked about this.
Okay, acronym
Yeah.
deficiency.
Right, unit hourly utilization. For
Okay.
every call that you run, you get 1 hour credit for it, all right? When you start talking about the additional paperwork and everything that's involved in an EMS run, a typical run is actually about an hour and 15 minutes. This length of call over here is from the time the wheels roll to go pick the patient up to the time we drop them off at the ER. That has nothing to do with any of your documentation or anything of that nature. So when you start talking about running 9,000 calls divided by the five units, your UHU for the service as a whole is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 23 to 24%, which is not high. But when you think back to Station 1, running that 29% of the calls, that truck's UHU will occasionally bounce up to 32 to 35%, which is a safety hazard when they're there on a long duration shift. So just keep that in mind. And 2021, it only gets better, guys. Patients transported out of county, and totals for the first quarter, we've already run 2391. For the year, we're going to be up around the 94 to 9,500 runs. So, like I said earlier, the call volume just continues to increase. So, yes, sir.
And that call volume doesn't count the time they have to reset their truck. Is that right?
That's exactly
So if
right.
you have a very traumatic call,
Yes, sir.
you could be, hours resetting your truck?
Yes, sir. There's a difference between unit utilization, hourly utilization, and time on task.
Okay.
When you start talking about, and that's why when your UHU gets over 30%, and then you include your cleaning of your truck after every run, you're checking the truck off. It takes about 30 minutes to an hour a day to make sure all your equipment is there, make sure everything's working appropriately. That's where your time on task starts to creep up. So you start to see how easy it is that these guys are not down very long and they're not getting a lot of sleep. In fact, Station 1, very, very seldom do you ever have a 6-hour break between calls to actually get any kind of real rest.
Wow.
And that's why it becomes unsafe.
Yeah.
So, and that will be important as we move forward. All right, difficulty recruiting and retaining. As I said earlier, we've lost 14 in 24 months. Out of those that we've lost 9 paramedics, 1 advanced EMT, and 4 EMTs. What that tells you guys is we're losing the top clinicians that are supposed to be taking care of our citizens. This right here, losing 9 paramedics, that's another one of those things that keeps me up at night. Trying to find a way to make sure that the guys are engaged and they feel appreciated and wanted because we may not be able to hit these targets down here. We conduct exit interviews with our team when they decide to leave us. And so far, what we're finding is schedule, pay, call volume, room for advancement in a small service. Not a whole lot we can do about that. We're a small service. And then you start breaking down into like your volume and so on and so on.
How many vacancies do you have currently?
We currently have no vacancies. We have been incredibly fortunate over those 18 months. And I commend the supervision, the frontline supervision, the team, my XO, and Carrie for keeping morale incredibly high through challenging times.
So no vacancies?
No vacancies at this time.
That's amazing.
Now, with that being said, just so you know, we have no vacancies, but we have 2 individuals deployed. We have one that's still out on a medical from her return from Afghanistan, a paramedic, and we have an EMT that is with the South Carolina National Guard, and he's engaged with vaccines. So that's the reason why we still struggle to make sure all the stations are up, because we have those 2 folks deployed.
I guess,
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Ashley, please.
I guess the real question, Gerald, that I would ask is, out of those 9 paramedics, how many of those have been replaced?
I think we're down 2 paramedic slots from this time period. So we've replaced 7
Okay.
of the 9. What we have done is we've educated and sent a lot of our EMTs through advanced EMT school. So they're capable of doing some cardiac monitoring, but they're not capable of diagnosing what they're looking at on the cardiac monitor and then immediately addressing what they're looking at. And I used a bad word in pre-hospital. I said diagnosis. We don't diagnose. That's a mid-level or higher.
Right.
We do field impressions. So a paramedic can make a field impression and immediately start treating what's in front of him on standing orders. Advanced EMTs are a little bit more controlled by the state on what they can and can't do. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
On pay, on these 4 items, is that an order of priority or just random?
Recruiting and retention?
Reasons.
Oh, no. Actually, sir, that is, the majority of people complain about the schedule, 24/48.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, the majority of people leave us to go somewhere else for schedule or pay. We found more for schedule than we have pay.
They want the 72.
I'll be darned.
What is
24
the
off.
pay?
Say again?
What is the pay scale for a paramedic and a EMT?
We start around 50,000 for a paramedic. EMT starts at 34.4, and an AMT starts right at 40.
Okay.
But-
Is that close to industry standard, or is that high or low, or?
Well, actually, I sort of hit on that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
We have been very fortunate to stay competitive through reacting to what's going on around us. Not proactive, but more reactionary. You can go to Lancaster County and start out as a paramedic about $5,000 more than what you can in Kershaw County. Now, that's the pay side. What we're seeing is more services are going to a different, they're staying on what they call a long duration shift, a 24-hour shift, because it would be very hard for rural services to be able to pay 12 hours. It's just more difficult, all those bodies. So most services have gone to 24/72, or some services are going to 24/72. And that 24/72 is starting to really hit us. Florence County, you wouldn't think that we would compete against Florence County because they're so far away. But you take a medic that lives in Lee County and there's an opening in Florence, they're going that direction. Calhoun County, and it's in a future slide, but Calhoun County has recently gone to 24/72. We've lost 1 medic and we have 2 in the batter's box. We have 2 that are looking and have applied to go to Calhoun County. And there's no way for us to be able to compete with that.
A question.
Yes, sir.
So that I can compare apples to apples, if Lancaster County is paying $5,000 more as a base, what is the number of calls per paramedic in Kershaw County versus there? I know you probably won't have the answer right now, but that's something I'd be interested in.
Yeah.
If you're getting paid $5,000 more because you're handling
Right.
whatever percentage more calls as an individual paramedic,
There-
or a team, I guess?
Yes, sir, team. And they're certainly running more calls than we are, but they have more trucks on the road. And I wish I'd have talked to Clay about that. I want to say that they are currently up to 9 or 10 units on the road a day.
Yeah,
believe
because
it's
I know
9 or-
the growth up there is exploding.
It's exploding. And again, their tax base is completely different. And I'm a realist. I recognize that, Lancaster County's tax base is totally different. The Indian land, even Clay will tell you that the Indian land area and the growth up in that part of their northern part of their county pays for the southern part of the county. And guess where we're at? So, we're down that side, so.
Yeah, but if you could get that to us, or for me, that would be helpful, because
Yep.
I just want to see if we're at parity or being competitive. Thank you.
Yep, yes, sir. right, and this is the difficulty in recruiting. This is exactly what we were just talking about. Another company that has taken a couple of our paramedics over the past 18 months is First Priority. First Priority is a transport service here in Kershaw County. Well, actually, they're based out of Columbia, but they do keep a truck, and they have the contract with the hospital. They start their paramedics annually a little bit around $1,500 more than we do. They also run a 24/72 at First Priority. So we're competing with these three folks right here just on schedule.
So what would you need to do to be able to change your schedule and adapt?
24/72,
Right,
there's several different options. One is, and we'll talk about those here in a moment.
okay.
This gentleman right here worked for us for quite a while, Scott Dunham, excellent paramedic. You probably saw him out on the road years ago, Sammy. He is with First Priority now, and schedule and pay captured him. So
And First Priority is not even, they don't run trauma
that's exactly
to
right.
your degree.
That's right. They're a interfacility doctor's
Transport.
office kind of
Transport only.
Transport.
And you're saying their pay scale is
higher.
higher than
Yes, sir. And it's, again, trying to compare apples to oranges is difficult, but we're all competing for the same workforce.
Right.
But you take a private service like a First Priority, because it's not an emergent call, they have no legality or legal responsibilities to the citizens, they can pick and choose who they want to respond to, or they can set up the contract like with the hospital. They respond to the hospital to pick someone up that doesn't have insurance. They're probably, and I don't know the details of their contract by any stretch of the imagination, but they're probably receiving some kind of stipend which is close to your allowable. It makes sense?
Right.
All right. All right, so the elephant in the room that I have no control over, this is definitely on y'all's plate though. But like I said, it is definitely out there, guys. We dodged a bullet with the Prisma deal. The potential sale of Kershaw Health with the loss of fee in lieu, that is 25% of our revenue. So that's a chunk.
Let me just say, we supported, we didn't dodge a bullet. We supported the sale of Prisma, okay? So, but the issue was, if that happened, they were a nonprofit, and therefore we would lose the FELO.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that
I
is
think that's from
definitely
an EMS perspective.
correct.
Yes.
Well, whether it is one for us and we support the local hospital, coming from his perspective,
That's
dodged the bullet.
is a big bullet.
That's exactly right, and I should have clarified that. I apologize. That is certainly something that was keeping us up at night. We were worried about it, but you're right, sir, that the hospital certainly needs to be competitive in their market. So, and reality is, it's only a matter of time before it happens. All right, the aging fleet and equipment, right here, that's unit 14. We're setting at 176,000 miles. EMS has been unable to successfully meet the replacement schedule set forth in FY 17 and 18. EMS 2 was supposed to be replaced in 1920, but instead, to facilitate 24-hour fire service, we ended up building the station there behind the Blaney Fire Station. EMS Station 1, if I remember correctly, was slated for this upcoming year. We were hoping to be out of that building sooner than later. EMS 13, we still have it as a primary backup. You've seen it on the road. And the reason being is because we did not purchase those 2 units last year to be able to get it out of our inventory. EMS 14 this year was scheduled, if I remember correctly, to go for a remount because we would have started remounting 14 because of the mileage. So we'll have a dependable backup fleet. And we are still running one Tahoe with 283,000 miles. So, yes, sir.
Just for some reason, with going to the Dodgers, I thought we brought a little bit more life expectancy out of our units. What's average for a unit on mileage that we normally get? Because I thought it was over 200.
It is.
Okay.
It is, absolutely. The key is our original plan was to, those first 2 Dodges that we had, to rotate them as very good backups. They were going to stay in our backup fleet for 5 to 6 years. Or if I remember, and I've got it here somewhere, we weren't going to look to actually push it out of our fleet until after 250,000.
Okay.
So.
Because I think that was the reason of deciding to go to them when we did.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I can tell you, they are workhorses. I mean, we've been very pleased with what we're getting out of them. Maintenance costs have been relatively low. But again, once you start getting up to 180, it's time to start thinking about rotating that to a good, solid backup.
And Ms. Tucker, I would, our maintenance costs on those vehicles are much less than the other costs were.
Right.
So we're not spending the money to maintain them at this point that we would have spent on the other vehicles.
Right.
So the Dodges are definitely a good investment for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, by this thing here, it shows them listening to a Columbia radio station instead of FM 97.5. Now, just to summarize where I am right now, is schedule, pay, fleet, facilities. Those are the 4 messages I'm picking up without any commentary. And then the 5th one might be equipment. Are we going to get to equipment later on?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay, well, I'm not asking you to get in front of your briefing.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. I do have some other mileages, but they're equivalent to 176. So we do have other units right in that ballpark. So if we can, again, get back on schedule a year later and start rotating these trucks into a backup type role would be real good. As far as the equipment question that you had, Chairman Burns, that's actually in solutions further on in the discussion. But
Okay.
I just wanted y'all to sort of take the time to ask any questions that you may have on threats.
I do, thank you. What you said, this was out of your wheelhouse, and I understand that, but the potential loss of the fee in lieu is a huge factor we've got to think about. But I would think, and this is just me, that the mode in your building and to make sure there's safe living quarters or work quarters would be a top priority, or probably the top priority, wouldn't you think, or am I missing something?
No, sir, you're not missing anything. Buildings are certainly important.
If you got mold in them, I mean, that's,
That station is down. We cannot go back
dangerous.
into that station. We're running the crew out of the government center. That has worked, but it's not ideal. We've seen an increase in increase in response times to those areas I mentioned earlier of 2 to 3 minutes on average. So
that was
we're
actually
ma-
my next
we're-
question with
we're-
you moving in.
we're making do with what we have. And it's going to be a cost reward decision that the council has to figure out as far as priorities. Because buildings are certainly an issue.
Well, what I would think is the priorities would come from Vic and you to us. I mean, we're not the experts on EMS,
Right.
and
Well, and Ms. Jones, that's what we're doing, first of all, is making sure you're aware of all the situations that we're dealing with, and understanding from the councils, we present the budget to you, we're definitely going to have for you solutions. Gerald's going
your
to go into some of the,
recommendations.
yeah, he's going to go into some of the possible solutions right now, so you can be chewing on them. None of them are necessarily what we're saying, this is the best solution or the worst solution, but we want to give you the understanding of what we see solutions are. And then as we get into the budget itself, then council can kind of chew that up and we can end up with where we're going. Yeah, but you're also dealing with a capital issue, which is different than an operational, as you know. So the source of funds for capital is one thing. Again, we put a pause on all spending 15 months ago when COVID came. And so, that was the immediate threat to us is would we have revenue coming in to cover budgets, and so we cut all capital spending. We cut all costs that were not absolutely necessary, and so it was a priority then we carried that budget into this year, and we started relaxing those issues, but that's why we're behind.
But
It's not-
see, but seeing that we're so far with the COVID pandemic, with everything that has happened and the priorities that are up there, especially with stations, we can do some temporary things to carry us for a few years, such as you don't have to always build a Taj Mahal. You could get another mobile home unit out there for less money, because we're dealing with fire, we're dealing with, the sheriff's department, we're dealing with EMS. I mean, and there is no money.
And those are some of the solutions that
So I hope
that we
that
looked
we'll-
at. Right, and so
I hope
putting them
we'll-
downstairs was our temporary
Sure.
solution at very little cost to the taxpayers, but still being able to deliver 98% of what we were doing beforehand. But
Just my thought. You could take that mobile home, tear it down, and put something else up, brand new or decent there. And sure, it wouldn't be something you want forever, but at least it would carry us through a few years while we're trying to work on the fire and other things, because we've also put a lot of money into EMS last couple of years, and it was definitely needed, and I support those efforts. But I'm just saying that I would hope that instead of just always getting Taj, and I don't mean be disrespectful when I say Taj Mahals, but you know what I'm saying. Sometimes you have to kind of crawl before you walk or run, and I think this is certainly one of those years that we're in. But I'd like to see some solutions coming back from you and your staff, maybe, A, B, and C, plan A, plan B, plan C, to include something that I just spoke about.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
I yield, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
A question on financing. So the topic was brought up about the fee in lieu possibly going away if something ever happens in a transaction with the hospital. Are there restrictions on EMS funding like we've been familiar with in fire? We got a big education on that. And, millage is restricted. You can't pull from particular areas for operation costs. Are there any limitations on EMS we should be aware of for funding as we consider that?
yes, there are limitations, but not like with fire. Our EMS millage covers the entire county, so every taxpayer pays EMS millage, which is not the case with fire. So the limitations are not the same as fire. So general fund money can be expended
General fund.
on EMS expenses.
Okay, thank you.
That's where it's coming from now anyway.
Yeah.
2/3 of it. My question, Vic, is do we own this land or do we rent this land?
We own this land.
Okay, and how many, what's the size plat out there we have?
I can get it for you.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's not a huge parcel.
okay.
The market's crazy right now, though. You go to build anything, and it's compared to 3 years ago when we were building some of these stations, you're looking at a 50 to 100% markup on some stuff due to labor and materials. I mean, it's just nuts.
Yeah, most of those are cabinet makers, I understand.
I wish it were. I wish it were. We've been hit hard. We've been making adjustments, I can
Yeah.
agree.
And we're still getting help from Mr. Cobb, correct? Over at Light Point.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's a wonderful partnership. I'm very appreciative of that.
Question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Have you seen, since you've moved this, you had to move out of that station, looking back, when we plan to rebuild, whatever that looks like, is that still the ideal location for another station? Or has the last 2 years taught you, well, maybe, it needs to be something, because I mean, if we're going to do something, it's good to evaluate your locations and are they strategically in the right spots?
Absolutely. And dating back to when, like I was saying, 17, 18, when this discussion of replacing Station 2 started creeping in, Gene and I had several conversations, and Vic was included in some of those about the location of Station 2. It would be very good to be able to push Station 2 either up Highway 97 long-term or further down Flat Rock Road, giving us a slightly better jump on some of the outlying areas.
Right.
So it is not an ideal position.
Okay.
No.
But also let me say, one of the things that we're going to have to be cognizant of is going back to that volume at Station 1. Station 2 is the primary backup for Station 1. And the statistics back in, I think it was 2016, 2017, showed that, I want to say it was like 65% of the time when that truck left Station 2, it was turning to the right. It was going back into Camden. That's where the bulk of the calls are coming from. So if you push it too far out, then you lose your strategic
Right.
backup to Station 1's area unless we're going to attack the call volume for Station 1 by looking at an additional rig.
Well, that was my question.
Yes, sir.
What, I would be interested to know in kind of almost like a heat map of Station 1 and 2. So we know that's good volume, but where in Camden, or the area is those two stations going? I'm just thinking out loud. You got, as you head towards the northeast part of Camden, East Camden, I mean, that's a densely populated area. And just as an observer who has an office on Highway 1,
Sure.
I see you guys rolling by a lot.
Yes, sir.
And so and I'm sure you're rolling a lot in Lugoff too. So I'm not saying that.
Yes, sir.
I would just be curious to know that it might be worth looking into trying to be able to strategically put something where it could get to that part of town. I don't know.
It's funny that you mention that because Robert Johnson, director from many years ago when Station 2 was first built or put up on that piece of property, Robert recognized that the location of that station allowed him to go down and hit Sanders Creek Road
Right.
and get back over to US 1 and back into
Right.
town on the East Camden side.
Right.
Okay.
So again, strategically speaking, it's not an awful location, but you've got more growth taking place up in the lake area. And what we're seeing right now is response times up to Liberty Hill. That's our longest response time. You're talking 27, 28 minutes up to that area.
You cut 10 off just moving back up there.
Say again, sir?
You cut probably 10 minutes off just moving back up to that location.
If we
from here.
push the truck up 97 or even up further on Flat Rock Road, you could cut that down, yes, sir. But again, the problem is volume, just like we faced with the truck in the Bethune area, your volume, and then cost versus, improvement of service.
Let me ask a question, if I may.
Yeah,
If you had it your way, where would you put it strategically?
We were
You do
looking-
it every day. What makes sense to you?
Yes, sir. We were looking at some property, and you remember the name of we were looking in the Gaines Church Road area of Highway 97.
Yeah, I'm
Back
familiar.
this side of Gaines Church Road. So again, we could jump back into Camden if we had to.
So isn't that close to, don't we have a fire station up there?
We do. We have a fire station on Barron DeKalb Station.
Yeah.
It's on Flint Hill Road about, gosh, I used to drive that when I was on the QRV a lot. I want to say it's probably about 5 miles further up.
I mean, is it potential to put a small station on that parcel? Do we have any land available to build on next to the fire station, or is it all filled up with parking lots and buildings?
I'm not 100% sure of how much land is in that area. I will say again, though, unless you're going to address the volume in Camden, where we only have one truck, pushing that truck too far up to the lake is jeopardizing response back in the Camden area.
Yeah, but that's pretty close to where you said at Flint Hill, right?
Uh,
It gains.
The backside of, Gaines kind of wraps around. We were definitely talking Mr. Kelly has some property up there, if I remember correctly, Steve Kelly up 97. And that was kind of the area, I just can't remember the name of the road, but it was back this side of Gaines Church, sir.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something we already had that would work for you.
Combine the two stations.
That was
Do it
close.
like a Blaney?
Sure.
Is that was before my time? Is that what we did there?
No, yeah, recently
Yeah.
we built one right behind Blaney Fire Station. You got EMS there and next to solid waste, so it's all.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Well, we're not going to, I don't think we're going to be pushing stations anywhere because you certainly will study and you're going to make recommendations to us. This goes back to council why I said, wouldn't it be great instead of building these stick buildings, put some mobile units there? Because if the call volume changes and population changes and, you're constantly having to move to different locations, different stations, different locations, I just think it'd be great to look at some mobile units and look at land we already own in in that vicinity. And I think that would be a smart way for us to move ahead until we sort of get our feet on the ground a little bit better throughout everything we've been through the last year.
If I may.
Yeah. And
Councilman
that, I
Jones,
know that made good sense.
Like a mobile EMS
Also,
station?
let me just say one more thing too, since I had floor. Robert Johnson, y'all may want to do a resolution or a proclamation for him because he saved my life years ago. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Robert Johnson.
Really, what happened?
I'll talk about it later. But it's a true story. But I figured y'all might want to do something for him because I wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case.
What I want to recommend is, it's just, without hearing what you guys have to say yet, is that the property that we already have, I know Councilman Jones is talking about mobile units, but if you build something out of sticks more stable, we can put that part of the equation away, and then instead of moving around like we're a mobile unit of EMS, you add units to the location, and then you can reach out further because you've got more units that don't have to rapidly respond. Like you were talking about, if you push through 497, you're going to have to add another truck down here to Station 1. I kind of like those ideas because of it's easier to manipulate a truck than it is a building or trailer.
Okay.
I don't necessarily disagree with what you just said.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay. I'm still into schedule, pay, fleet, and facilities, and turning the dials
Right.
on these means a budget that, as Mr. Jones is saying, is both the current and a future look. It's based on a good strategy. Okay, thanks.
All right. Moving forward, fiscal year 21-22, areas of discussion and focus, of course, are going to have to be based on the revenue issues that we have hanging over us, growth, loss of possible fee in lieu, personnel recruiting and retention. I'm a firm believer that people always come first. We have to make sure that we're taking care of our folks, so personnel recruiting and retention, and then operational readiness. Little funny, that's one of our jump kits, believe it or not, with our training officer hiding behind it. Anyway, revenue, all right. Projected revenue. Property, 700,000, delinquent taxes, 50,000. Inventory replacement, right at 4,000. This is just the breakdown of what the millage is getting us.
Go back, please.
Yes, sir.
That's the current millage that's on the books.
Our EMS mill is 5.1.
That's it. Rest of it we get from fee in lieu, and we subsidize what we need
Right.
out of general fund.
What's that total right there?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure, but I can show you what, with the fee in lieu added, miscellaneous revenue there, and then the payer mix. The total is $4,300,000.
You got to back up. You're going too fast for us.
Yep.
Or for me.
I was under $1 million then. I thought it was $3 million total. $4 million.
Okay, thank you.
Fee in lieu, as we talked about, 976,000. Miscellaneous revenue, the debt set off projected for this year is going to be 70,000. The AA building that we share at Station 1, that's rent for the AA building side, right there. To get how much EMS is actually going to bring in, you have to have a little bit of an understanding of what the payer mix for Kershaw County is. Commercial insurance is around 51%. We're pretty lucky there. Medicare is around 27%, Medicaid 7%, and private pay around 13%. Resulting projected revenue for this upcoming fiscal year is right at $2 million. So we're bringing back in $2 million through our fees. Right now, you were asking about Russ Cobb earlier. We're actually capturing right at 76% of the allowable. So that's pretty good. There's a lot of EMS services in the nation that would love to have that number. So that's what we're pushing out there.
So you're saying right now you're about $2 million a year?
Mm-hmm.
That's the projected for next year.
Right.
Right. The current year's projected is 1.67 million. So that's the current budget. He's talking next year's projected.
Right.
$2 million.
So if I may, if we really want to be just bodacious is the word I'm gonna use.
Bad and bodacious.
We can put about roughly 12 mills onto you, set you on the millage, take the fee and lieu that we're getting, let it go into the general budget, and then your 2 million, and it may be a little bit more than 12, and kind of even out your budget where you'll have a steady flow of every year of growing unless the county grows. And I say that because that's not a tax increase, that's a shift, if you follow me, my colleagues.
You're saying turn current revenue projections and all in and change it to a millage?
Like we did Central Carolina.
Can we get a copy of these slides? And if you could supply some of those numbers, I'll be able to total up the fee millage that you had there. That's easy enough, but
So with 12 mills, what are we fixing?
that's an interesting concept, Mr. Tucker.
Yeah, the idea is 12 mills. What are we trying to fix with 12 mills?
That was Mr.
EMS.
Tucker's idea.
Huh?
EMS.
EMS, is that assuming FILO or no FILO?
Well, the
Well-
FILO is going back to the general fund, but if it happens to fall off, it's going to fall out of our general budget. It's not going to affect EMS.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So regardless of FILO, you're
Right.
talking about having a more stabilized millage base instead of a
Can't rely on the
stopgap.
hospital.
So at this point, it's not stopgap anymore. It's not a one-off year. We've been doing it for years because we have to.
Right.
So you're saying stabilize it with a mill.
And then we deal with the fee and lieu when we lose that $1 million revenue in the general fund. And when I say we, I'm talking about council and staff.
So it'd be a more consistent budgeting process instead of each year we're kind of, oh, let's scramble and figure out how do we pull
Absolutely.
from the general fund that. That makes some sense because it's already funds that you're expending, and why not budget for it?
Yeah, and we should remember how we got here, and I think there are those who remember that. When we took over EMS, we took a $2.3 million fee from the Health Services District, Russell. So they gave us $2.3 million, I believe, something like that.
2.6.
2.6, so that would ease the transition of ambulance over to us. And the ambulances were in terrible shape, and thank goodness we have these two gentlemen here that led us through it. And then, as a part of the deal for the hospital, we imposed roughly $1 million FILO every year. So we've been living off of that for these many years. So did I summarize the situation as y'all remember it?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yep.
2.6, right, Jimmy?
Right, but
And that's a one-time pay from the Health Services District. Okay.
But still, what we did, Russell, to give you the whole story, it was a 2.6 jump start, okay? That's what the health district or the hospital board at the time gave to us. So we did that with a 17-month commitment that we would run through that money before we did anything else to see what we needed and where we needed to go. But within 9 months of that 17 months, we put a new station up and did some other things. So, you know, we sort of moved forward a little bit quicker than we told them we were going to. And, you know, I have a question. Has anyone else talked about the fact of shifting these monies and going to 12 million? Is this the first time everybody's heard of this?
Yes.
Okay,
Wow.
good, good. No, I was just wondering.
Yep.
I just
So,
had a question. I was
there's-
just curious.
There's nothing really broke yet. Is it? What's broken? Because I'm a little bit curious as to, I mean, if we went to 12 mills, we would be doubling the millage rate, which would cause a tax increase, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
Tell me again how it wouldn't.
Okay. You got X amount of mills that comes into the county now. So you figure out what the millage is to operate EMS. So the revenue funds will go in, the 2 million, and then the million of what we call fee and lieu. So that's 3 million. He said his budget is $4 million budget. So I'm gonna hypothetically speak, say it's 16 mills to operate EMS. that comes out of what you collect in your general fund. But the offset to some of those mills is going to be the FILU and the revenue that is generated by EMS. So there's going to be a shortfall, but you're not increasing taxes. It's going to be in the general fund where we have to figure out what we're going to do about that and the administrator. But it's not a tax increase. It's a tax shift. I promise you it's not a tax increase.
Okay, yeah, I'd be happy to look at that. But
Mhm.
now you're saying there's going to be a shortfall if we lose the fee and lieu agreement. Is that what you're saying?
It'll be a shortfall as a whole because you're taking more millage out of the general fund and directing it to EMS. And I don't know exactly what that number is because I don't know what we're subsidizing exactly right now.
Or
Yeah.
asking Vic to cut.
Right. So, yeah, if you can't find more revenue sources. But it's going to be on us, not on EMS. It'll stabilize EMS.
But we did similarly,
Talking
Did-
to Mike, Jimmy, I can't hear you.
well, we did something similar. We, you can ask me nicely the next time. When we took, back in 2012, you weren't here, a lot of you weren't here, I know Sammy and I were, but back in 2012, we had what I considered a balanced budget with the solid waste, but we took it out, created a line item for it, and then we ended up having $25, $50, and now an $80 fee for that. So I just want to look at this very carefully when we start talking about, oh, we can neutralize this, and we can neutralize that. And I do commend you, Brazel, for seeing you want to see those numbers, you know, and understand what you're talking about before we move forward with anything.
I'm not asking anybody to agree with me today. I'm just throwing out what's coming in my head on how to balance this budget and some ideas.
And Vice Chair, please understand, I'm not necessarily disagreeing. I just too want to see the numbers because one thing I don't want is, you know, take from the left, give to the right, but we're still empty on the left. You follow me?
Oh, yeah.
And then the taxpayers have the burden of,
Well, when I look at the numbers a little deeper, I might not want to
Finishing
do it
that
either. You know, because I don't know the exact numbers yet without sitting out and going over.
Yeah, I want to ask a little bit further about what Russell said, and that is what's broken. What I thought I saw, Gerald, was a concern on facilities. That's broken. Secondly, we have a full year of not buying ambulances for you, and that hurts. Thirdly, we see attrition and recruiting driven more by schedule, but also by pay. So those three things to me, as I keep mentioning, schedule, pay, and facilities, come to mind, and then the fleet. So is that how, if you can get to Mr. Brazel's point in more detail on those four things I talked about.
Absolutely. It comes down to whether or not increased response times are acceptable. With shutting down Station 2, you've got a large sector of the county that is looking at 2 to 3 minute increased response times. So, you know, if council's okay with that or comfortable with that, then I guess you could say it's not broken. From my standpoint, from an EMS director standpoint, I recognize that, you know, time is very, very critical for 10% of every run that we have. 10% is about the number of time-sensitive calls that we run: respiratory, cardiac, stroke, trauma, and so on and so on.
okay, I have an issue, and maybe I just took it wrong, but you're talking about reduced response time. You're saying if we, council, is comfortable with that, so we're throwing it on us that if we don't do this, it's going to, I guess I just
I certainly
have an issue to the way that was presented to us.
I'm sorry. I certainly didn't mean to.
Because everybody up here cares about life. Everybody up here cares about response time. Everybody up here cares about the citizens of Kershaw County. But what I don't care about is someone trying to say something that would intimidate or back me in a corner, because that won't happen. That will not happen. But every man up here cares about life and safety. Every man up here cares about the fire service. Every man up here cares about law enforcement. Everybody up here cares about EMS. But I am not going to sit here and say if we're comfortable with something less responsive because department head or administrator does not get everything they ask for. Thank you.
Let me just go back to that again. Trying to put it in balance in the context of what Mr. Tucker talked about. Right now, we're not 24/7, and your assertion last year was that 24/7 might help us on the schedule issue, and that comes with a cost.
Yes, sir.
So we stick with the current cost procedure for schedule. It's cheaper, but it has risk of losing people if we don't go to a more expensive model, which is, was that 24/7?
2472.
72.
72, excuse me,
72.
excuse me, 24/72 in the current system.
Yes, sir.
So there's a differential there,
Absolutely.
okay? And
Absolutely.
then the other differential is pay. So are we going to be presented with either or 24/72 and current and or pay? Are we going to be given some kind of presentation that you want feedback on?
We have suggestions on how to get to 2472. We have 3 different options that
Okay, and we're going to get to that later?
yes, yes. sir.
Okay, we're way out in front there,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Okay.
All right. Is that helpful to everybody? All right, okay.
Okay. All right, so personnel recruiting and retention.
There it is.
Modified 2472 schedule. Significantly reduces the number of hours team members are required to work, again, increasing morale. This schedule for some of the other services has shown to reduce call-outs by up to 30%. Our
What's
goal
a
is,
call out?
someone who calls out last minute, 7 o'clock in the morning, they say they're
Okay,
sick,
All right.
which again, always impacts the coverage of the county. Schedule has been shown to improve recruiting and retention of competent, experienced clinicians in the South Carolina market. Again, I have 2 incredibly fine paramedics that have applied to go to Calhoun County solely because of the schedule. Modified portion of the schedule, and each option provides for 1 ALS unit covering the county for the majority of the operational time period. So what that means is it's a modified 24/72. Every X number of days, depending on which option you go with, you're actually bringing 2 additional bodies on duty to staff an ambulance. So option 1. Option 1 creates 4 shifts with 10 members each with the addition of 4 full-time employees. We're currently setting at 39. We would need 43. 4 more. That's exactly right. Yes, sir. Now, how do you get to that number? Because you're creating an entire shift. It will require hiring an additional, I'm sorry, that should say 4. That should say 4, I apologize. Reduce the number of units assigned to each shift to 4. So you'll be going from 5 ALS trucks on the road every day to 4. All right? Your 5th is going to be brought back up by your on-call team, which will be working scheduled overtime. It keeps the deployed resources at 5 units and 2 QRVs. You don't get anything extra. You're not addressing the increased call volume that is also a threat. It requires the nominal increase in salary line items, but still allows for a more favorable 24/72. It reduces the number of hours worked from to 2715 from the 2920 to 2960 that I talked about earlier. And it does not increase the number of apparatus covering the county. Like I said, for the assigned shift, you're going from 5 trucks to 4. So you just have to keep that in mind. The cost of the additional personnel will be in the range of $120,000 a year.
That's for 2 or for 4?
That's for 4.
Because you're cutting some of the other expenses by not having 5 stations, but 4.
Okay.
So basically what I read what's happening here, and I don't mean to sound like I don't care, because I do, is this is a morale booster.
The 2472 is certainly going to be a morale booster. What this doesn't do is address the increased call volume.
Right.
And that is unfortunate.
Right.
This is option one. It's the cheapest of the the three options, but it gets you less. And if I can go into option two,
Yes, sir.
I'll
Please.
explain that to you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, option two, it creates the fourth shift, but with 11 team members. The assistant supervisor will come off of a QRV and assume a senior paramedic role on an ambulance. You will need to go from 39 to 47 employees, and it will require hiring seven full-time employees. I can tell you the reason why those numbers don't quite match up, guys, and it just dawned on me, and I do apologize. Remember when I was saying earlier that we have 2 folks deployed?
Mm-hmm.
We have been running heavy FTEs over the past about 10 months. So we actually have 39 bodies filling roles every day with 2 deployed. Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
So we've been running heavy FTEs the entire year because of COVID. The number of call-outs that we've had because of COVID or quarantines, we would have been shutting down stations left and right if we had not picked up those additional 2 FTEs. And we've done that with the existing monies that's in our salaries, and we're still going to have some at the end of the year left over. So that's probably why those numbers aren't 100% jiving with y'all, because we're actually running heavy FTEs.
Which is full-time employees.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is. And we did that, again, being proactive early on in the pandemic, because we knew it was coming. And that's what a lot of this comes back to, is just being proactive instead of reactive.
Mm-hmm.
So increasing the number of units assigned to each shift to 6, with the 6th unit being comprised of the scheduled overtime crew. That 6th unit will address the call volume, the increased call volume, and the increased UHU that is so concerning. It will reduce the number of QRVs on the road to 1. We will only have 1 command and control, and he will be based here in the Camden area supervising. It reduces the number of hours worked to 2643. Again, you see an increase or a decrease in the number of hours worked because you have an 11-man shift that are going to rotate through on call. So you actually have your scheduled overtime day every 24 days as opposed to every 20. That makes sense. Adequately addresses increased call volume and unsafe UHU conditions. And for me, again, as the director, what's really important, this plan has been endorsed by our Workforce Improvement Committee. We have a group of clinicians, professionals that meet monthly to address our concerns inside the department. And this is the plan that they feel very comfortable going with, because it addresses the recruiting and retention, and it addresses the high UHU and increased call volume. It will require reexamination in the near future to bring the 2nd QRV back up. Those QRVs, even though it's only 4%, they do a lot of ALS backups. That's just something you have to remember. The cost on this would be around $400,000 salary and fringes. Yes, sir.
Let me ask a question. From your management standpoint, would it be more beneficial to you to be able to pay less people more money? Or would it be more beneficial to just have more people on staff? Because it seems like it looks like we're paying kind of the industry standard.
Right.
If you were able to pay just a little bit above industry standard and provide I guess you work a 24-hour shift and then you're off for 3 days.
Right.
That's how that works?
Off 2 days.
Off
You
2
work
days.
1 day, off 2. The 24/72 would be work 1, off 3.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Yes, sir.
So is it more beneficial to you as a manager to be able to pay these guys a little more to recruit the very best you can and maybe have a few less employees? Or is it more important to you to have as many people in as many slots as possible?
Right.
And to just be meeting the bare minimum pay industry standard?
Sure.
Because, I know the quality of the employee means a lot to me typically.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
I think that we're dealing with a unique workforce dynamic. Paramedics, EMTs, advanced EMTs that are coming out of school today are more concerned about work-life balance than they are the paycheck solely. That's why I'm seeing so many people leave to go somewhere else, because they're getting that additional time off.
Mhm.
They're not working those 29.60 a year. They're dropping down to 26.43. That's 300 hours that they get to spend with their family, friends, shooting pool, yeah, whatever. I think we continue to look at the dynamics of yesterday when it comes to the workforce of today. And this is something that we've spent a lot of time over the past 5 years addressing. First of all, and y'all have heard me say this before, EMS has this identity crisis. The identity crisis for EMS is, are we healthcare professionals, or are we first responders, public sector entities, like fire department? You would not ask a nurse to compromise her work-life balance for a few dollars versus a schedule. Does that make sense to you? Because they're trained professionals. They're a niche. And you have to go out and you have to meet that niche. So ideally, you're going to compensate them well, and you're going to give them a schedule that benefits them for more work-life balance. I hope that answers it.
It does to some degree, but I think the question still was, would you prefer a higher pay for less people, or would you rather have more positions to fill?
I'm going to go, I don't have a crystal ball, but I am going to go out on a limb here and say that we could give an additional 5 or 6% raise, but if we don't change this schedule, we're going to have staffing problems in the near future.
Take the schedule out of the equation. Say that we do change the schedule to the more attractive schedule.
Right.
Then how would you answer that question?
I believe if you take the equation, the schedule out of the equation, then you want to make sure that your employees are receiving a good living wage. So you would have to, once everyone is on a 24/72, then that market is going to become competitive again, and you're going to have to go back to trying to hit them for more pay.
Russell.
Not, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, Russell, basically, I think what you're asking, I may be wrong, is do you want to take care of what you got now, or do you want to continue to expand?
Well, I mean, it looks like we need to expand to some degree, but I don't know if there's a
But we have
happy
a full
medium.
staff now. They have a full staff. They have no openings. They've had openings. They've had to replace, but there's no openings right now.
Right.
So it must not be that bad to work at Kershaw County.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I think he needs a few more staff members to get to that more attractive schedule.
Yes, sir.
And then my question would be, you know, because I'm sure there's going to be yet another need beyond that for more people. But do you recruit the top of the top with maybe an extra 5% pay or whatever, or do you just hold it at the industry standard and try to get 1 or 2 more people to cover your shifts better?
I think as the director, I would be failing in my job to make sure that my folks are taken care of for not going for that 5%.
Sure.
I mean, that's just my view. Like I said earlier, you've got to take care of the people first. And what our industry sees is a nomadic type mentality where people travel 30 miles just to get an additional, $500 to $1,000 worth of pay. They don't have that loyalty that used to be generated or that used to exist in the workforce. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Let me see, can I understand, from my point of view, what you're requesting? I think going to the 24/72 frees them up and gives them more time off, so that should generate a pool of people for call-ins too. Or will it not?
Well,
Because now they off 3 days instead of 2 days.
yes, sir.
And
But certainly, EMS folks are, a lot of times, they're workhorses. Our guys work 24/48s. They work somewhere else to make sure that they're making ends meet or whatever. Because, again, we're competitive, but you're not going to get rich in EMS, that's for sure, for like law enforcement.
Yeah.
so folks have second jobs. We will always have the ability to pull people in on overtime. The 2472, especially the modified 2472 that you're looking at here, brings on a sixth truck. So if you have a call out, you wouldn't have to go to the overtime well. You could simply move one of those crew members around, spin up 2 QRVs, and you're back to 5 ambulances and 2 QRVs.
Okay, more maneuverability.
Correct. So,
Okay.
so what this plan actually does is it brings that extra truck on duty for $400,000. You're getting an extra truck to address the call volume. If you have multiple call-outs, because again, the pandemic or something of that nature, you're still going to end up with 5 trucks and 2 QRVs.
Okay. And the reason I'm saying that, because I know just being, whether it's government or corporate or private sector, your biggest problem is when people have issues at the last minute on coming to work. And it happens in every industry. I don't care what industry you're in.
Right.
Trying to cover those folks. So I was just thinking if you had more people with more time off, because a lot of times you've got a little crew that you can always depend on that would come in when on days off. Then you got some, they're busy than a one-legged man in the butt kicking contest.
Not coming
They ain't coming in.
That's right. Yes, sir.
And you've got those folks.
But again, this plan allows you to have some flex with staffing.
Yes,
To
sir.
be able to cover those, so you're not spending more money
In overtime. So it addresses the overtime issue as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Is there an option 3?
There is.
Okay, you already
Well,
want
just
to
real
go?
quick.
Go ahead.
Well, something hasn't been mentioned yet, but based on my research, and you've got 2 staff members that have a really good EMS podcast, by the way, and
Matt Seals.
yeah, it's
Yes, sir, you did.
it's really good. So I encourage everybody to listen to it. Kind of helps you get a perspective on the EMS world. But this is a mental health issue too, right?
It is.
I hope you guys realize. I mean, so you think about a trauma that a paramedic that possibly could experience, not every shift, but the possibility is there. So it takes a day just to recoup your sleep, and then another day just to kind of mentally recoup from whatever trauma they just had, and then that third day is actually to go and do family stuff and get things done, right? So kind of speak to that. This is a mental health issue as well.
It certainly gives you more time to recover, and whether it be mentally or physically. A lot of times when people are saying they're going to work at another service for a 2472, and I had a gentleman come in recently who turned in a resignation. He said, listen, I get off at 9 o'clock. I've slept maybe an hour to 2 hours. I go home and I sleep until 4 in the afternoon. I've lost one day. Now I only have 24 hours off. This gives you that more recovery time mentally and physically. And mental health is becoming a much bigger issue. And 2448s or 2472s are being looked at from a national scale on whether or not it's truly in the best interest of the individuals to run. Long duration shifts, again, because it's so expensive to do anything other than that, long duration shifts are challenging, but rural counties don't have a choice but to do them.
Councilman, you said 2 employees have podcasts. Who are they? What is that?
I don't know, but I came across it recently. It's really good. It's just they just talk about the industry and
Right.
But he brought it up, so I just want some clarification on it.
Absolutely. Matt Seals and Wesley Price have a podcast. It's an educational show that talks about how to set up a epinephrine drip or a dopamine drip, Levofed or whatever. They just use some of their time, use some of their coworkers to just promote EMS as a whole.
Also, I have had a couple of folks ask me about first aid courses.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If it can get that from you, I'd like to get a list or a schedule when you got some, because there's some folks who would like to do that. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Option 3, how about that?
All right.
We'll let you get through your briefing eventually.
Option 3 creates that 4th shift, 12 crew members. You're not losing your assistant supervisor. So you're still keeping those 2 command and control units on the road. You need to go from 39 employees to 51. It is the most expensive, and I recognize that it's probably cost prohibitive. Will require hiring an additional 12 full-time employees of various certifications. In the other 2 options, we've been able to hire EMTs or advanced EMTs. We don't have to have the most expensive paramedics because you're using your existing pool to subsidize those EMTs and advanced EMTs. Reduces the number of hours worked to 2643, the same as option 2. It adequately addresses increased call volume, just like option 2. But the big deal is the fact that you're now looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000 in additional revenue. That's a big price tag for any county, I recognize that.
It's
What's
scheduled
that?
overtime.
SOT is scheduled overtime?
Scheduled overtime, yes, sir.
You're killing me with
I'm
that.
sorry, sir. Sorry, scheduled overtime.
Why do you say it's cost prohibitive? You making a judgment?
Again,
I mean, I've got sticker shock, I admit it, but why do you come in and say this is not a viable option?
well, it's not that I'm not saying, I know the other issues that we have. And the other issues that we have is maintaining good equipment, maintaining stations, maintaining competitive pay. So there's a lot of things that made me say that. I mean, if you guys are comfortable with $750,000, I'm certainly comfortable with it. I've always
Hey, if y'all
told
want to give me the money, I'll spend it.
I've always told you, you guys tell me what you want, and I will do everything I can to make it happen. You know, so, but again,
Okay.
that is option 3. It is, you do have some stickers out there.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so the modified 2472, again, if approved, the plan will be enacted somewhere in the second or third quarter. The reason we want to do that, Mr. Brazel, goes back to what you're talking about. We want to be able to take our time, measure twice, cut once, and make sure that we're getting the best quality folks in here.
Mr. Brazel, know about that measuring one?
You like that wood analogy there? That was good. That's good. Very fitting.
I wish I could say that was on the fly. It really wasn't. Existing
I
money.
just cut a lot.
This would certainly is something that sort of offsets some of the cost. Like I said earlier, we've been running heavy, a couple of FTEs this entire, 10 months of this past year. And we're still going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 125,000 left over in our salary line items that could go to help pay. Another thing, this is going to reduce the use of part-time staff. We have about 140 and we're thinking that we can shift about 80,000 of that to offset some of the cost. Again, trying to get the biggest bang for the buck for the guys in the field. It will negatively impact the reserve funds. We won't have money left over at the end of the year to be able to continue purchasing our ambulances. So changing the schedule is going to impact that reserve fund. Just keep that in mind. As I said earlier, doing nothing to assist recruiting and retention of staff through a better schedule is not a sustainable plan. Other services are doing it. If we want to be strategic, we've got to get out in front of it and start thinking along the lines of making it happen.
Can I ask you a question on the, because I'm a little bit,
Yes, sir.
so you're saying it's going to negatively impact your reserve fund because you're pulling some of those monies out, like your part-time position line item and things of that nature that normally gives you that reserve at the end of the year?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir. That money, that 125 that's left over this year,
right.
in its own special way, I don't know all the specifics, but that will help bolster next year's reserve fund.
Okay.
If we have more FTEs and we're using that money to pay those FTEs, we'll have less going into reserves.
Yeah, that's next year's ambulance you're looking at right there.
Right.
So,
When you say your last bullet point, doing nothing to assist recruiting and retention of staff through better schedule is not a sustainable plan. So what are you're saying, y'all won't be able to do your job, or?
I'm saying that we will have a harder time making sure that we have staff,
Quality staff.
quality staff, adequate staffing.
Well,
Right now, and,
Go ahead.
and just for a second, think about Orangeburg County EMS. Love Orangeburg, love the director. and
Good barbecue down
the
there.
operations officer. But right now, they are sitting with 20, at last check, look, 22 open vacancies at Orangeburg County.
But we're not Orangeburg County.
No, sir, we're not. And that's what I said earlier. We are so lucky to have, in my opinion, our supervision, our family atmosphere. We are competitive pay, but
Okay, we are competitive pay. We have a full staff. you do a great job. And I just have problems with doing nothing to assist recruiting and retention of staff through better scheduling is not sustainable. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement. I feel like to say to these 5, 6, 7 people that are sitting up here. So you're telling us if we do nothing, it's not sustainable. So therefore, definition of not sustainable.
If I may, Ms. Jones, I think that what Mr. Gerald was trying to explain to us is that this problem is going to continue to build if we sit here and do nothing. And what I don't want to do is become an Orangeburg. So sitting down doing nothing makes everything that much harder. Year on, we keep kicking the can down the road.
Well, let me get to your point, Jimmy.
Go ahead. We don't kick the can down the road. We've done some great funding for EMS. We've done some great funding for the sheriff. We've done some, and we're looking at doing some great funding for fire. So I disagree with that. You know, the taxpayers only have so much money. There's only so much money to deal with. And I'm sorry, General, go right ahead.
I do understand that. I'm going to respond right quick and General can go.
No, I'm not a general anymore.
But then Chairman, Julian, whatever.
I do understand that, but I think there's means where we can get some things done. We haven't done anything in recent past for EMS. We've taken the bridge money and we've done that. We should have been further along ahead in following this before we even got down to some of these scary moments with the sale of the hospital and things of that nature. But
that's the biggest scare we've got going on. We've got very good EMS right now, guys. They're running great. Look at where they were 5 years ago. Look where they were. So no question that the fee and lieu, to me, is, that is the big thing that we need to be concerned about, because we certainly could lose that. That's $1 million whatever dollars, or 97, whatever. Anyway, I'm just saying that I just have problems with the last bullet point.
But I think, to be fair to the director, I think he's doing his job. I mean, he's not supposed to come here and say, man, it's great, y'all. EMS is awesome. I don't need anything. You guys keep on doing what you, I think he's just making us aware that EMS is great and it's fantastic, but there's possibly an iceberg out there, and he's just kind of starting. And I've been on council 3 years, and I heard this 3 years ago, and it was kind of like almost like the yellow light, just caution. This is what we're looking for. And so I think he's just continually to remind us, you guys have been great to us, but just want to keep you out in front of this is, as I look 5 years, 10 years down the road, this is what we're going to encounter.
I understand.
So I don't take any exception to that. I take it as somebody who is looking down the road and doing his job.
I just want sustainable. Tell me what you mean by sustainable then.
I think what he said, if we don't do something better, he's going to keep losing staff to more attractive.
He's got a full staff.
Right now he does. But as he looks down the road, I think he sees that the possibility does exist that he may be short-staffed. So, I mean, it is a strong statement, but I'm just assuming he's doing his job and fighting for his
here's what I'm
people.
saying. We have 19, 20 departments we have to deal with. We have sheriff's department, we have fire.
And they're all going to come in here and do the same thing. And it's our job to
Well,
decide.
the sheriff hasn't done it. The sheriff hasn't done it in 3 years. He hadn't asked for any increase.
Well, I mean, he didn't say he wants a millage increase. I think he's just telling us what we're looking at. That's our decision.
Millage increases are. You have to get the money from somewhere. So why isn't that a millage increase, Councilman?
I mean, to him, he's just saying, this is what I need.
But you just said it was not a millage increase, but it is. If we were to fund that, where's it going to come from?
It's got to come from somewhere. But then, I'm just
I understand,
saying.
but I'm just trying to bring a point up that was made.
Right.
And that's the second issue that I've had about maybe not being able to be ran properly or not being able to ran call volume exactly. If we're comfortable with that call volume, I'm not comfortable with anything that said the best we can do. And if you tell me that something's not sustainable, then you're telling me it's not going to last.
Mr. Jones, if I may.
If you may.
It won't last in the long run.
What's the long run then with that projection?
This is worthy of discussion.
It is worthy of discussion.
I mean, obviously we can't see.
May I ask, who on council would say it's not worthy of discussion?
If I may.
No, I'm saying
one
it
said
is.
that.
That's what I said.
Well, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that, because if anybody up here said it was not worthy of discussion, let's talk about it right now, because
No, that's what I
we're
said.
talking about spending the taxpayer's dollar.
Yeah. But can I ask you this?
And I would not be quiet if somebody even said that anyway. Thank you.
Well, that's fine. The last bullet is is worrisome to more than just me. I mean, Jimmy has expressed concern.
Thank you so
So
much.
here you see nothing, doing nothing. Okay, let's take that word out and say, if I change the sentence to read increasing pay, and this is the balance, okay? Do we increase pay or do we improve the schedule? I mean, is there a trade-off here between those two?
I believe that, again, to be competitive in the EMS healthcare market, you're going to have to be competitive in schedule and in pay. We've lost more folks in the last 18 months than we had prior, the 2 years to 3 years prior to this, that 18-month period. We're losing more folks on a more regular basis. And that's what leads me to believe, looking down the road, that we've been incredibly lucky to where when someone resigns, we have that slot filled within 2 to 4 weeks. Generally about 2 weeks, and we have the slot filled. That's only going to be, our reputation that we have now is only going to allow that to continue happening for so long, especially the more services that go to 24/72.
Yeah. Well, put it another way, previously you answered that question I made to you. Thank you for these. You answered the question by saying schedule is more important than pay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir?
I just have to make this statement because it's burning in my belly. We asked our staff to come up here and give us honest opinions on what they think. And I think if something offends us as a council member or as a council as a whole, let's state our piece and then let's move on. Because what you don't want to do is have staff intimidated to come up to give the truth or state what they believe to be in best interest for their department. And I've been sitting here a long time, just like you, Councilman Jones. I don't always agree with what they ask for or approve what they ask for, but I always want them to be truthful and honest to what they see the department needs and what they have to operate an efficient and effective department within this government that we so call ourselves leading and guiding.
You don't think I do?
I didn't
Is that
say
what you're
that.
saying?
See,
Because I ask questions, I have a concern with the issue up there.
You picked the things out of what I'm just saying for a negative. What I'm saying is state your piece, but I don't think that we ought to be changing what they put up here and present to us.
I asked for an explanation, Councilman,
Yes,
Vice
sir.
Chairman. I didn't ask for him to change it. I asked for an explanation. When you're telling me that doing nothing to assist recruiting and retention of staff through better scheduling is not sustainable.
But he gave you an explanation. You didn't like the explanation, but he gave you one.
No, I didn't say I didn't like his explanation. I just didn't think it was a clear explanation.
Okay, why are we still talking about it?
Because you are making a comment about my comment.
Okay, so you got to
If
have
you
the
hadn't
last
said
word.
nothing, it had been over. No, if you hadn't said anything, we could have moved on.
All right, I'm done.
But you and Councilman Snodgrass took issue with what I said, so y'all came to his defense, and you didn't need to come to his defense. I'm not against Gerald.
No
I'm
one
just
said you
asking
were.
questions.
But see, you
And I
stated
just want clarification.
You
And then
stated-
somebody obviously mentions to the chair that this is not worthy of conversation.
No, you
said it's worthy of-
misunderstood
How
the
do you know
statement.
that, Councilman Snodgrass? You're on
what I-
that end of the table.
Well, first of all, he wasn't even talking to you. He was talking to Russell, if you want to know the
I
conversation.
understand. I've just asked for
But
clarification.
he did not say it's not worthy. He said it's worthy, is what was said, because I was sitting right here listening to
chairman
them and
did
listening
say
to
it
you.
was worthy, and
But
I
he was
thank
talking
the
to
chairman
Russell
for
about
that.
something
Thank you.
else.
Why don't you let me ask my questions?
Because you keep talking over me. You just keep going on and on. I'm treating you just like you treat me,
I understand.
okay?
We're on slide 17 of
We're talking about a lot of
25
money, Vice
slides, right?
Chairman, a lot of money.
I love you.
I'd recommend we go to the next
got you.
slide.
All right, staying with the topic of personnel recruiting and retention, we're moving away from the 24/72. This is something that some other counties in the state have been doing for a while. Richland County is one, and Ms. Brown has certainly helped with some of this discussion, but it's retention and longevity bonuses. Establish and implement a longevity bonus plan to reward team members for maintaining a continuous, stable work environment for clinicians. To be rewarded in 5-year increments, 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5 years to be rewarded as a bonus on the anniversary date or added to salary. I believe Richland County does a one-time check. One-time check, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. The initial implementation would be the largest amount of money. There are 12 of us rather that would be looking at that bonus of 1% for the 5 years. All right, that's us doing some training and work with the sheriff's office there and Asher. Just thought it was a cool picture. I really love that picture. All right, operational readiness. Constructions of new EMS Station 2. Replace station vacated due to mold located at Lockhart and 521. Since closing the station, service to the Shepherd, Westville, Barron DeKalb, and Liberty Hill areas have seen an increase in response times. Suitable for housing 2 crews that meet DHEC's expectation of climate-controlled bays. We were talking about a mobile home earlier. That is certainly an option. I'm not saying it's not. But the stations that we have now put less work on the shoreline AC units because they're in a controlled environment. DHEC expects the equipment and the medications in those units to be controlled. So our stations that we are currently building optimally handles that. It's a significant cost increase. We recognize that. Projected cost for a new station is going to be around $800,000, and that number came from Pete Furlong, our projects manager. The one thing about having the station at the government center has been the positive is it has reduced the UHU for Station 1 to 22%. So Station 2, 22 to 24%. Station 2 coming to the government center because the volume at 1 is so high, it has balanced that out. Construction for new EMS Station 1. As I said earlier, this was supposed to be a 3 or 5 year plan being in that station. It's a damp, old concrete building prone to flooding. We talked about that earlier. We have had significant vector issues in that building over the past year. We've had to have it closed several times for extended period of time due to roaches, rodents, bed bugs. We have even taken on the responsibility of treating the AA side at this point through our budget to try to control the vector. But it's an old building. It's just got issues. Difficult to heat in the winter and cool in the summer, resulting in high utility bills. I believe our utility bill average for this station is around $700 a month. $700 to $800 a month for utilities. All right, continuing on operational readiness. Again, going back to these new I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
We ran through the personnel recruiting and retention pretty quick. Back to that last bullet point, initial implementation would be the largest cost, $8,000 for 12 team members. What is that? Is that like a hiring bonus, or what is that? I misunderstood that.
They've stayed on board with us for 5 years. We're going to give them 1% of their yearly salary in one check. Retention bonus.
Okay.
To say thank you.
Okay, and the initial implementation of the retention bonus.
There's 12 team members, not including myself, that would be eligible for this bonus.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I just needed to clarify that. Thank you.
No, I appreciate the questions. Go back to that picture. I love that picture. All right, construction of 1, we went through that. Okay, new Dodge 5500 Type 1 ambulance. Continue to replace or remove the high fleet G3500s out of our inventory, out of our fleet. This truck, for that price tag, which again, there is some sticker shock there, I'm sure. It has the Stryker power load. That is about a $30,000 system. That physio cardiac monitor with rack, that's about a $35,000 system. Power load oxygen system, that prevents back injuries. It lifts the oxygen tank into the truck, so you're not looking at worker comp claims. Our new trucks are going to have radio systems in them. As you guys probably heard from Fire, the 800 systems that we are currently running in our trucks are soon to be obsolete. Yes, sir. So we're going to be ordering trucks with the radio systems. again, that adds to that total up there. It's very important when you develop some muscle memory when you're in the back of an ambulance, you know where everything's at. So we're staying with identical compartments set up and ease of, familiarization. We don't want to move away from the Dodge 5500 if we can help it. We can move to a different company, may save, I think we've gotten quotes from other companies that we're saving like $5,000 to $10,000, but they're all in that range, that 290 range. And just so you know, generally new trucks are purchased out of our existing reserves. So we're always capable of making our truck purchase. The schedule will have an impact on that, as I mentioned earlier. We're also looking at trying to get our first remount. I don't know if you're familiar with ambulance remounts. A typical box can be remounted on a new high mileage chassis. Industry standard is once. You can push twice, but then you start worrying about the integrity of the box. But we are looking at trying to remount one ambulance. EMS 14 is a 2015 high mileage Dodge, the picture that I showed you earlier. We could, in the third or fourth quarter of next year, get this truck remounted for around $160,000. Fully refurbished patient compartment. They'll go in and make sure everything cracks, busted cabinets, everything's repaired. Electrical components are replaced. Again, we will have to go with a new Motorola system. We will be replacing trucks that don't have the power load. Again, reduction of back injuries is a primary reason. And the purchase made from EMS reserves in the third quarter, like I said, we would want to make sure that we get that first unit ordered and we're still setting good with our reserves before we go down that road.
On the remount, what's the mileage on that truck, you know?
It's going to be, by the time we would be looking at third quarter, it would probably be up around 200,000.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is everything that, all of the trucks that are being bought with cash out of reserves. We're not financing, we're not cash flow financing. They're just, we've saved enough money to write a check.
Again, I'll compliment the staff. We really do try to pay as much attention as possible for any waste. So yes, savings have purchased the units.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
What about radios? The sheriff and you guys both hit the constant theme of radios. You mentioned radios, but is that a part of the reserve purchase as well?
The radios are going to be, when we purchase an ambulance, it's what's the word I'm looking for? Turnkey ready. So it will have the new radio system in it, so we don't have to worry about replacing it until it's.
No, the answer is the radios are included.
Radios are included, yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Yes, sir.
No.
If we get our first one and it works the way I hope it will, anytime you're taking, and we would need to go through the same manufacturer, we would want to go through AEB. Because they're talking about electrical wiring. You don't want to take a different manufacturer and try to hook those new wires in. If this goes the way we want it to, then this would be a significant cost savings towards our reserve fund wouldn't be needed as heavily.
You can get 2 for 1 almost.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Remember I just mentioned that $30,000 monitor? Well, that's an LP15 there that recently we ended up having to take out of service. As you can tell, the handle got busted. We were looking to replace that monitor anyway because it has a lifespan of about 7 to 8 years. $28,000 every 7 to 8 years should be replaced. I believe it was Mr. Jones mentioned the legalities of that, and I know Mr. Connell has mentioned before about why we constantly talk about end of life. This is medical equipment.
Right.
You go out and that monitor doesn't work, write the check out. I mean, it's just, and the only thing that's going to be determined by the lawyers is how many zeros that.
Yeah.
I mean, if that makes sense. So that's where we're at, gentlemen. I appreciate your time. If I said anything that offended anyone, I do apologize. That was certainly not my intent.
You didn't. All right, we still have a quorum. Ben said he may be able to come back. Mr. Gardner, of course, has got work issues. I think Mr. Jones has departed, so we're still at 4. Let's continue to talk, gentlemen. What do you think?
A lot. Well, first, can I, if I can, Gerald, thank you. Thank you for your presentation and your honesty and giving us what we need to hear. It's kind of hard to make good decisions with incorrect or inadequate information. So I just want to thank you and your staff for that. And I want to say thanks to Ms. Brown, too, who does a lovely job in our finance department there on keeping up and making sure that all our departments are within their budget means and trying to save. So kudos to all of you. Thanks.
All right.
No, I echo that as well. You did a great job presenting. Like any good manager, you're looking out for your employees and wanting the best for them. And, you know, that's what you should be doing. It's up to us to balance,
Amen.
you know, the finances and see what's first and how to help you prioritize how we move forward.
Yeah. I think you all would join with me in saying we have a certain amount of scientific objectivity that's been attached to a very subjective topic that's absolutely vital to the county. And we saw the same professionalism in the presentation of On Fire. And I don't mind taking blame if this body makes a mistake. And we do it all the time. That's what we get paid to do. The further up the flagpole you go, and being on this council is not very far up a flagpole, but it's high enough. But the higher you go up the flagpole, the more your backside shows. And if we make a bad decision, we own it. So it's not the staff, it's us who are the policymakers. So that's what we do. So you're signed up for criticism, whether you make the right or wrong decision. So let's just move on with the best decisions we can make that God can inform. So what do you need from us, Vic?
Well, Mr. Chairman, again, to kind of restate some things. First of all, Gerald and all staff are told to come up and tell you the unvarnished understanding of where they are and what they see coming.
Yeah, well, next time put some syrup on it or something.
Well, you know,
This is hard.
Mr. Blanchard has shared with you what he sees coming. It may not be tomorrow, it may not be next year, but it's coming, and it's opinion. And we are asked to give advice, so we will give recommendations. You know, and that's what we do. We recommend, but council makes the final decision, especially on the biggest issues that are policy related. And obviously, no one questions anybody's commitment to health and safety and life, but y'all have to make big decisions here. For us, going forward, we'll be presenting a budget to the council. What will be helpful to us is in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that if you have additional questions or concerns about anything you heard, reach out to us so we can better formulate for you the proposal to you. You know, it's again, Gerald's job is to run an ambulance service with the resources he's given and do the best job he can. I think evidence shows, you know, and to your point, Mr. Chairman, about the competence and the professionalism, I will remind you, or if you didn't know, I will inform you that Gerald is the incoming president of the State Association of EMS Directors. So his peers have certainly recognized his ability to run an EMS station, and I would take what he thinks is important as gospel, because clearly he's been doing this for a lifetime. So we will prepare a budget, but you know, if we receive no further input, then we'll receive a budget based on our best ability to provide to you, and it'll probably have, you know, where we sit now, it might have two components. One is status quo. We normally present you a status quo budget, which is with no additional resources, here's what we do. Or a recommendation that might require. In most cases, we rarely would require additional resources, but given some of the circumstances he's facing, there would probably be one that would be provided to you that would show additional resources and what that would look like based on our recommendation. Recommendation is just a starting point. Council will then take those recommendations and change it as you best see fit and go a direction that you see fit. And that's our job, is to give you that best information. So the long answer to your question, sir, is if you have additional thoughts, questions, or concerns, please let us know so we can give you the best information we can.
Let me tease out some questions here. starting with Philo. They've raised the warning signal. So my feeling is we got to be ready for that. And Act 388, I think, applies, except for the solution, I think, that Mr. Tucker came in. So as a matter of concern for me, we've got to be ready to address the Philo issue. Okay, it's just got to happen. And I think that's complex, and we'll have to chat about that. The second one is fleet. I think there's no demands on us for resources other than to approve the use of reserves this year. I think that's what you said. On facilities, I didn't think I got a real clear signal from any of these gentlemen or from me on whether we go in a trailer or we live in black mold for the rest of our lives or we live in the current tank. So I don't think we gave you a good signal on facilities. I'm just saying. Not our fault, it's just I don't think we did. On pay versus schedule, I'm leaning towards fix the schedule. Now, you've been coming at us for 3.5 years on this schedule, and I'm leaning towards your solution. I liked option 7, though.
That wasn't on there.
Yeah, there was no option 7.
Keep talking about it a little bit.
So I'm in favor of schedule over pay. Having been deployed most of my life, I know what you mean, okay? The money didn't matter after a while. It was schedule. I'm tired of going to this place and that place all over the world. But it's the same, it could be said here for the uniformed personnel in this county. So I think we got a gap in guidance on facilities. I think we're okay on fleet. I think we got to address this Philo problem. It's going to hit us one day, if not sooner. And I'm in favor of the schedule issue. Guys, any further comments? I think y'all have a free shot at any of these people today and any other time going forward.
We'll go ahead and address it now. I'll speak to your facilities. I mean, something needs to be done. I mean, the only thing that concerns me is, big tax hikes. If we can do it, if you can issue a bond that's tax revenue neutral and something that makes sense, you just got to tell us. I mean, a couple of us have talked about combining a fire department with EMS. That's done in other counties. I think that's a way to use our resources better. And I don't know about how everybody feels about that, but I personally have friends. I've got a good friend in South Florida. She retired and she was EMS and she worked in fire stations. They utilize the same facility. Last week we talked about fire. This week we're talking about EMS. So it's up to us to help formulate something that makes sense for the taxpayers. Whatever we need to do, we need to do it. We don't need to, I mean, that little single wide trailer's been sitting there as long as I can remember as an EMS station. Either we build something there that's revenue neutral from a tax perspective. We can figure that out together, but we need to move forward some way, shape, or form. And the other building, I'm not as familiar with, but it looked like it needed some attention as well. So, as Mr. Jones said earlier, give us a plan on what you want to do, or give us a plan, Vic, as to how we could combine fire and EMS and save money, and at the same time still provide good, solid solutions for everybody and a good, healthy environment, something that's not, infested with mold and cockroaches and everything else.
Comments? Others?
Gerald, I just would say, because this is just such, in the scheme of things, minuscule of money, that you probably need to get with finance and Mr. Carpenter, and you work out your retentions, because that means so much to the employees at little cost to the taxpayers. And I'm really surprised it took us this long to even do this, because this has been in your field, not EMS, but in the medical field. Nurses have been getting retention and sign-on bonuses and things of that nature. That's just where we moved at in all industry. So you guys brainstorm, figure out what's going to be best practice. And I appreciate you sharing this with us, but this is something you guys could do internally to save the ones and encourage the ones to stay and get this money so they can feel that they're more valuable to Kershaw County.
Others? Yeah, sir.
I'll just echo what Russell said about the facility. I rode by that station the other day, and it just kind of hit me. I'm like, man, that thing looks terrible, you know. And then there's out front is parked a 1995 Chevy Blazer. That probably who knows when the last time that thing was driven.
It cranked up just last week.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. I mean, so I'm all for getting a proposal and trying to figure that out. And I've, you know, mobile homes certainly an option, but I'm a long-term person, and I realize there's some things that you do that 10 years from now you maybe face the same situation. So if you're going to do something, you do it when it's time to do it. And along the lines with Russell, since I've been elected, I've always, and I'm naive to the industry. I get that, but I've always said that there seems to be a natural dovetail with fire and EMS, and that as a county, we should be looking more towards seeing how you guys work together in tandem, whether that's sharing facilities or being on the same property or whatever. It seems to be very effective just from a cost standpoint, and because I know other departments do that. So thank you for what you do. People don't realize that as a paramedic, these guys are pushing drugs. They're making, I know not diagnosis, but you're making field observations. And when you compare that to someone like an RN, and we're not trying to say who's better, but I mean, these are individuals who are trained to be able to maybe do more advanced with less, you know, because of being out in the field instead of being in a controlled environment of a hospital. You know, I think about you guys get on Lockhart Road or out in the country and just like 4 or 5 of you, and you're trying to do for a person that they really probably need a team of 20 people to do, you know, and they do get that once they get in the ER. So as far as the retention, I'm all ears on how we can make sure that we have the best, because at the end of the day, we're all elected to be good stewards of the county and be good stewards for our citizens. And when our citizens dial 911, I will fail in my responsibility as an elected official if they don't receive the best employee, the best paramedic, the best truck, and the best EMT to their door when they dial 911. So keep up the good work. Thanks for keeping us on our toes and making sure we know what's coming ahead of us.
Okay, you got enough guidance?
Yeah, and in closing, let me just say that you know, we always present council a budget based on our advice and recommendations. That's going to happen. And for things like a building, you know, or any capital things, if there are different ways of paying for something, we'll present you those options as well. But we'll give you, you know, the options. So the budget we'll present will include how we propose dealing with all these and how we propose to pay it, because that's what we always do. So I don't want anyone thinking that we're sitting here wanting y'all to tell us how to spend the money. No, we will present a budget that is our advice on what to do, and y'all will accept it or not, as you always have done. So, but we just want to, in presenting alternatives, I don't want to have another recurrence of presenting an alternative and someone saying, well, what made you think that was something that we wanted? So I just want to make sure that we understand where your thoughts are as we build your budget, so we don't waste time when we get into the process. But we have plenty of information. You got some good guys working here.
Okay, I think to that point, we will see the budget on first reading and second Tuesday in May, right? And that will be the next time we talk about the budget, or will there be other times?
We will have a budget workshop starting next week.
Next week. What time?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, Tuesday, the 27th,
Yes,
right here. And are those workshops televised in case the public
Yes, sir.
wishes to see
They're
them?
all televised just like this. They're
Okay,
televised.
you guys good?
Now, I will speak to that. I had a constituent actually text me this week and say, hey, I went back and watched the fire budget or the fire workshop, and it was very helpful. So
Well,
There's-
you know,
there's some
and if
merit
I
here.
could address that too, because, you know, it was said at some time in the past, why are we just hearing this? And that's another thing that I've stressed to staff: make sure council understands your issues so that they're aware of it. Some of these, Gerald, we've been talking about for 3 years. So we're trying to do our best to make sure council understands our issues, so it's not a surprise when or if we get to a point where we need to deal with them. So,
Vic, I want to make sure I had some numbers correct here, and maybe Gerald can help me out as well. The 21-22 budget, without adding anything to it for EMS, is about 4 million.
Yeah,
the current budget is 4.2 million.
Okay.
4.2.
Yes, sir.
All right, and then anything additional that we want, that we were showing today, we need to add to that 4.2.
To some degree, yes, sir. I mean, if we can save money in other aspects, then that would shrink some, increase others, but yes, sir.
Right. Okay,
I think I see where you're headed with that question.
yes, sir.
And the point about 12 mills moved around as to not raise taxes, is that your intent? Or,
I am exploring that, and
Okay.
I'm open ears to, and I don't hang on to 12 mills, because I'm sitting here doing math now, and I'm seeing that it's gonna be a little different. But that is an area that I'm exploring, and I'm open to hear others,
yeah,
you know, but I wanna get my numbers straight through Vic and through Gerald, and then I'll be able to do a better presentation, to my colleagues.
okay, okay.
Once you have that, we can look at a proposed tax bill we can pick a house in the county and just see how it's
Yes, sir.
revenue neutral.
What we normally do is, you know, like, try to do it like $100,000 house, so that way you can do it in, you know,
Multiples.
right, like 150, 200, and then you'll know what the cost, because remember, most of our seniors just got a $50,000, what you call a homestead exemption, so.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that was excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Sandra, Mike, Mary, and Vic, of course. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Not at all. I'll see-